Hey y'all, welcome back to part 9 of Figure Drawing Basics of Art Lounge. I am your host. I will be continuing from where we left off yesterday with a quick review of what went on yesterday. We were covering the ball and socket aspect of the figure. To develop a better understanding of the human figure in your mind's eye, you want to be able to just reference that, like I was showing you guys in a previous stream. If you weren't part of that, I'll show it. What I'm referring to, it's this guy right here. So you kind of want to have that in your mind's eye, in your imagination, so that when you are drawing from your imagination, or even when you're using a reference, you can refer to it to get a better understanding of the figure, how the joints move, their limitations, which we covered here, the range of motion. You don't want to create poses or pinups where the figure is tilting over or just doesn't make sense in terms of like gravity, in terms of maintaining the center point, as in, if you have the figure tilting and it's off balance, but it seems like he's standing still, it just kind of contradicts what the viewer is seeing, and you want to avoid doing that. You want to make as much sense as possible when drawing these, when drawing the figure, when making sure that the anatomy is right. You don't want to break up the image. You don't want to have like all the parts of the body being anatomically correct, but it's just a really uncomfortable pose, or the body's twisting in an unnatural way. It throws off the entire illusion of the illustration. Like we were talking about, you don't want to break the fourth dimension, in a sense, where the viewer is so engaged with what they're seeing that something that's off is going to break that connection, in a sense. So this just kind of gives you a better idea. And as you could see in this pose, it's pretty well balanced. Like he isn't going to topple over at any point. It's a pretty strong pose. And just to point out certain joint areas where the arm bends. And this is pretty obvious, right? You could just pay attention to your own body and study that. But it's another thing when you are drawing it. You're trying to make sense of it, and with the limits of what you know as far as drawing goes, you want to make it as easier as possible to get through the process, to get out what you're trying to draw. So that said, we're going to continue to build on that, to build on your mind's eye and the figure, and make it easier for you to just reference that. So I'm going to start out like a light sketch. Which, if we wanted to review more, the question is like, what do you want to remind yourself daily, so that it becomes just a habit that you don't even have to think about anymore? And I would say drawing lightly is definitely one of them. Sketching things out is another, and they're absolutely essential. Now, I don't think that's going to fit. Let's try to move it on a page. And as you guys can see, I am using what we discussed before, using the cup shape, just like a loose sketch of the cup shape for the torso, a cylinder shape for the upper part of the arm, then a more narrow version of the cylinder shape for the wrist area. And I noticed that the trajectory of the body, or rather, the angle of the body is off. Which is why it's so important to sketch things out lightly. Once you notice that mistake, it's easy to erase. Another cylinder shape for the leg. Just something quick. Don't want to get bogged down by detail just yet. And this is a little bit more of a challenging pose because there is foreshortening there. And foreshortening is just an object in perspective. You know, so if, let's say this is the arm, right, and it's flat form. This is the wrist area. This is the upper part, the shoulder. So the same thing would be drawn in perspective, where the hand give it a mitten, just for example, where the hand is going toward you, or facing more towards you, the camera. Now notice, it's a lot shorter, but just like the cup, you know, the idea of the cup, and if it's like falling towards you, it's gonna start to get smaller as it's facing away from the camera. It's like tipping over towards you. So it gets a little bit smaller, and that becomes a little bit more complicated when you are thinking of proportion, because, you know, as we discussed, you're using the head as a unit of measurement. So how do you use the head as a unit of measurement when it comes to foreshortening? And I think that's something more to do with practice. You know, once you understand the basics, once you understand the proportion, you train your eye to see everything in proportion, in a sense. And then from there, that's your foundation. There you could play with like the cylinder shapes and imagine in your mind's eye, right? This is what we were talking about. What that shape would look like in perspective. And that's just something that happens from practicing over and over and over again. You know, the whole idea of practicing is to get a better understanding mentally, visually, and practically, like all those things. And it just happens, you know, as we were talking about before, like when it comes to reading, you don't recite the alphabet every time you want to remember how the letter sounds, right? Or you don't pronunciate you don't exaggerate the pronunciation of words because you want to make sure you're reading them right. You just read the word without hesitation. And that's something that happened after practicing over and over and over again. You're able to just read fluently. And that same thing happens with drawing. You just start to imagine these objects, and you're able to manipulate them in your mind's eye And then with your hand-eye coordination being practiced as well, you're able to translate what your mind is seeing onto the paper. So that's a lot of what we are doing here in this stream, is just trying to build up that ability, just the same way that you've built up your ability to read and write, understanding grammar, understanding sentence structure and all that stuff. And that, you don't think about that anymore. It just kind of happens when you write, right? Or when you read. So yeah, that's what we're doing here now. And that's how you understand foreshortening after a while. There isn't, at least I'm not too familiar with it yet, like very technical, specific ways of measuring and making sure that it's proportionate. It's really just a combination of your imagination and your knowledge of the figure that allows you to like get the proportion of your foreshortening figure parts right. And as you can see, there's a lot of that going on in this pose. The arm is bigger, much bigger. The hand is actually bigger as well because it's facing the camera, or the viewer rather. It's much closer to the viewer than the rest of the body. You can't see the other shoulder. And it's not as long as, let's say, a front view of the figure. Everything is kind of like a chain reaction to the motion of the body. So because his torso is twisting, there's only so much of the other side that you could see. And because his foot is propped up on something at an angle, there's only so much of it that you could see. And just like another demonstration of the ball and socket. This is the socket right here. We get the ball for its motion. And here's the other socket for like the ankle and the foot. And this goes really well, like we were talking about, with this page right here, the range of motion page. Just so you understand the limits, really. And just to quickly go over it, for example, here, you could see that the range of motion going forward is a lot greater, whereas going back, it's much less. And that's something that you could test out yourself. Keep your legs straight, as straight as possible throughout the entire range of motion. Keep your entire body straight, standing still, and see how far you could extend your leg going back without having to bend it over. And you'll notice that it's true. It is only just about this much, as you see here. And then going forward, the range of motion is a lot greater. And that's just like the placement of the leg onto the torso, onto the hip area. That's just how our body is. It's just our limit. So knowing that could really help you make sure that your figure looks right when you draw it in different poses. There's definitely room for exaggeration, but I think it's important to learn all these foundations prior to doing that, just so that you could know where that limit is really from exaggeration, and when it just crosses over into just nonsensical stuff that looks bad. And that's really up to you guys to explore. Just another example. Another cup shape example. That's essentially what makes up the leg. The ball and two sockets here. Then we'll do another one that's facing more towards the camera. I remember for me when I was drawing, I got so used to always drawing from a certain point, you know, outlining basically whatever it is that I was drawing. So if I was to draw the leg, I would just draw this and take it all the way around. And I thought, you know, if you're going to use the traditional method of drawing simplified forms, like, it was intimidating, and I used to think like, well, how do you connect them then? You know, like, how do you fill in the gaps between those parts? And it wasn't until I started to take that leap and I started to like experiment with it that I found that it's a lot easier. And also adding on the other principles, like sketching them out lightly, you know, maintaining that. It was a new territory, and it was intimidating, and you know, I was already so used to getting good results with the method that I was using that I was like, oh, this is a step back. You know, this is a step backwards. This sucks. You know, I'm not getting as good results as I do when I'm drawing with the method I was using before. But I stuck to it because I just saw the advantages of how much time it essentially saves, and how it allows me to shape the figure in motion a lot easier. Especially, most importantly, the biggest reason why I changed or decided to change that method was because this method right here really helps with drawing from your imagination. There was a part of me that just didn't want to do references all the time. I felt like I was shackled to references that, I was always using somebody else's work, whether it's photography or somebody else's illustration or something. And it just bothered me. I wanted to do more of my own stuff. And this method really, really changed that for me, because now I don't need references. I could use these principles to essentially create whatever it is that I imagine. And if I get stuck on something, then I could really get into it technically, and I could be like, okay, well, if the cup shape is like this, what would it look like if it's turning further away? And play with that, and just from drawing, also from references, drawing from real life, practice being like an important role in it, I'm able to just there's instinctively a part of you from drawing so much that starts to recognize that looks right, or you could, even after you shape it all out, you could use a reference. For instance, you could use even the doll. Like, this isn't the best one because there are certain limits to it that aren't natural. Like, for example, you can't go up this. Like, we're totally able to do that with our hand facing upwards and bring the shoulder up, but you can't do it with this doll. So even though it helps to some extent, this isn't really the best one. I wouldn't recommend this one. I just like it because it's like the most old school version of these kind of things. It just looks cool. I really enjoy it when I look at it. But as far as it being good for a reference, there's way better ones out there that really do have like great range of motion that makes more sense than this. And this is just more of like an aesthetic thing, and to some extent, like if the pose isn't within the limits of this doll, like if it really does serve its purpose for whatever it's capable of doing, then I use it as well. But I haven't really used it as much. Like, I like to just draw from my imagination and wrestle with it and get it down. But yeah, all those things kind of help you recognize when something is in place. Once you're able to understand all these principles, once you're able to draw these figure parts and cylinder shapes and such. I'm gonna stick to what I was talking about before, which is filling up the space as much as possible. So just to reference, this is gonna be the arm right here. I'm showing this to you guys. I'm also relearning, or what's the better word for it? It's not relearning, it's solidifying. I'm solidifying it more so by practicing it again. Like, I don't think it's ever enough, personally, for me to like draw these out. You get better, you get faster, you train your eye to do all those things better and faster. So you spend less time wrestling with this kind of stuff and more time just creating awesome work. So yeah, it's not just showing you guys this stuff. I'm also really enjoying, I mentioned this before, I really enjoy drawing these simple forms out more, especially when I'm like nailing it down quicker and quicker. I'm like, yes, this is great. You know, you start to get into the zone in a sense. Like, this is a great stretch for me. Like I was talking about previously, like going to the gym, you want to do your stretches before you jump into like you doing more heavy lifting and complicated machinery and stuff. So this is like the stretching for the gym. So just another ball and socket example. For range of motion. Another one with same thing, but not facing the exterior, not facing, I mean the interior of the arm, or the socket of the arm, facing away. The ball being here. And you could just replace the ball. I mean, if you want to be really technical, like what is this ball? It's just the bone that allows, it's actually like a round shape, like at the end of the arm. It's like these, you've seen a bone, what it looks like. It has like these round endings that fit into like another socket shape covered by cartilage, and that allows you to just move it around. Those are the balls, basically. It's not actually like a ball there, and I'm sure you guys know that. Now, this is going to be fun. I would like to do all these different figures in motion with using these cylinder shapes and such. You might have seen it previously in a stream. I do enjoy doing them, but I think I'd like to skip it over, and for now, I'll revisit it again, but just continue on with these different parts and joints, and being able to use them as a way of building up the figure. And I will start with this one. Now, there's a part of me that wants to start from a different point, but in order to maintain consistency and just to show how effective it is to use the head as a starting point, let's start with the starting point of the head and build from there. This is another cool pose that I will sketch lightly. More cylinder shapes. I am getting into the nitty-gritty details at the moment. I don't want to do that. So let's recalibrate. More cylinder shapes for the legs. And now that it's pretty sketched out, we could start giving it more shape. Made a mistake of actually drawing the head a little too small, and the quickest way to notice that is the hand. The hand is about 3/4 the size of the head, whereas prior to this, when I made the mistake, just erase it. It was about the same size. It's a cool pose, just demonstrating the idea of balance. Making sure that everything does make sense. This wouldn't make much sense if it was shifting or if it was like leaning towards this way. if the entire drawing was shifting towards the other direction. It just wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't be able to have your feet so straight, connecting each other and not topple over. And that's just an example of, you might get everything right, you might get the anatomy right, but if the range of motion doesn't make sense, the entire image is just going to look poor quality. I think the arms also should be longer, and that's just an easy way to judge that is what we were talking about earlier, is making sure that the hands, the tip of the fingers, go beyond the pelvic area. So that's just a good way to measure. As you can see, just an example of how understanding the principles can help you later. It's a perfect example. Like, that the fingers are supposed to go past the groin area. So measuring based off of this pose, which is a pretty straightforward pose, you can determine, like, okay, it should be longer actually. The hands and the arm both should extend far enough for that to be the case. I will be right back. Gonna get a quick drink of water. It's getting hot here. All right. So here is gonna be another one. Quick sketch. So all these examples are just here to show the ball and socket range of motion. Show you guys, and just practicing it, just drawing it as often as possible to get better and better at it. I think, time is up for the drawing figure stream, but stick around. In 5 minutes, I will be streaming drawing comics. So I'll see you guys in 5 minutes.